Hello, see you again with Brainfactor channel. This time we will discuss about, is Judaism a younger religion than was once believed? Watch the video carefully and don't skip this video. And please help subscribe and like our channel. Thank you. Is Judaism a younger religion than was once believed? An Israeli archaeologist has written a new book in which he makes the startling assertion that many popular Jewish customs did not originate until roughly a century before the birth of Jesus. According to some estimates, it is approximately 4,000 years old, making it one of the world's oldest, continuously practiced faiths. It is also the grandparent of Islam and Christianity. At the very least, this has been a widely held perception of Judaism for a very long time. However, a recent discovery by an Israeli archaeologist calls into question those long-accepted hypotheses. Yonatan Adler of Ariel University in the West Bank, who has spent the past 15 years researching textual and archaeological evidence, has come to the conclusion that ordinary Judeans did not consistently celebrate Passover, hold the Sabbath sacred, or practice other traditional forms of Jewish ritual until about a century before the birth of Jesus. This conclusion is based on the findings of Adler's research. If he is right, then Judaism is at best Christianity's older sibling, and at worst it is a junior cousin to the religions of ancient Greece and Rome. If his argument is correct, however, Christianity is the older sibling of Judaism. Adler argues his position in a brand new book titled The Origins of Judaism, which was released on Tuesday by Yale University Press. It wasn't until about 100 BCE, according to his theory, that traditional Jewish customs, such as ritual bathing and avoiding representational depictions of humans and animals, were commonplace across the whole Jewish community. A little over 900 years have passed since the Israelites first established themselves in Jerusalem, which eventually became the hub of what came to be known as Judea. It is also several centuries after the majority of historians believe that Judean scribes in Jerusalem put together the books of the Hebrew Bible, a document that has been regarded for a long time as the basis of Judaism. Although some Judeans may have been aware of the laws and restrictions of their religion, this does not entail that anybody was necessarily putting them into practice, according to Adler's interpretation of the situation. Adler analyzed the findings of dozens of digs around the Levant region, in addition to historical literature like as the Bible, in order to get insight into how people lived in the decades leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in the year 70 CE. After reviewing the arguments presented in the book, various Near Eastern archaeologists and textual scholars have praised his study as being very insightful. According to Jody Magnus, an archaeologist at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill who has significant experience excavating in Israel, he offers a compelling case that is certainly worth investigating seriously. According to Harold Samuel, an authority in classical Hebrew at the University of Oxford in England, Adler's work is perfectly solid. The new findings challenge the traditional understanding that claims Jewish traditions evolved in the same era as the writing of the Hebrew Bible. Samuel contends that this perspective will be difficult to change in light of the new findings. It is also possible that they will bring up more general questions regarding the nature of Judaism and religion in general. Sacred baths, chalk cups, and sculpted pictures. The Hebrew Bible includes a number of precepts that must be adhered to in order to keep one's ritual purity. Over time, these precepts evolved into the practice of taking ritual baths in specialized immersion pools called mikvahs. According to the biblical book with the same name, which was written by one of Jesus' disciples named Mark, Jews who have just returned from the marketplace do not eat unless they wash. Over the course of the last century, archaeologists have discovered at least 700 of these modest baths dispersed across the ancient Judean landscape. Adler states that the vast majority of the pools were constructed between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE. According to the findings of a thorough investigation into previously found vessels, the archaeologist has determined that the usage of chalk pitchers, bowls, and cups for the purpose of keeping food and drink began around the same time. Chalk, as opposed to ceramic pottery, was believed to be impervious to spiritual impurities. Hence, it gained a lot of popularity among Judean homes in the 1st century before the Common Era, BCE. Because it is porous and dusty, the material is more difficult to create than pottery, and neither the Judeans nor any of the other people that live in the region have ever utilized it before. It also suggests that the rigorous prohibition against graven images, which is reflected in the 2nd commandment of the Bible, was a later development. Coins made in Judea during the 4th century BCE, when the province was a part of the Persian Empire, and then again after Alexander the Great conquered the region around 331 BCE. Often include both the names of Judean officials and images of eagles, bearded men, winged lions, and even foreign deities. This suggests that they were widely used by Judeans despite the biblical prohibition against doing so. Even in the vicinity of the Temple Mount, the most important Judean sanctuary on Jerusalem's Acropolis, this prohibition was not observed in a stringent manner at any time. Israeli archaeologists have recently unearthed a number of artifacts featuring likenesses, including an image of the Greek goddess Athena and a jug carved with the face of the Egyptian god Bes. The latter was made from local clay and is therefore not an import. The excavation took place just south of the site. Even though these items may have been owned by people who do not practice Judaism, the finds suggest that at least some Jerusalem residents did not adhere to the prohibition against graven images. Jewish religious holidays. On the day that is known as the Sabbath, biblical law prohibits a variety of activities, including making meals, writing, and collecting water, amongst other things. According to Rafat Cincino, a theologist at Boston College, we do not know how extensive the observation of the Sabbath was throughout early biblical times, nor do we know when exactly the observance of the Sabbath gained root. Adler supports his argument with citations from various biblical writings, including, for example, the titular narrator of the book of Nehemiah expresses his displeasure with the Judeans for flagrantly disobeying the regulations that the religious authorities had imposed respecting the Sabbath. According to Adler, the general population was not heeding their appeal. He continues by saying, if somebody would like to suggest that the general people knew of any form of Sabbath prohibitions, the burden of evidence is fully on the shoulders of that individual to show that this was the case. The same is true for significant Jewish holidays such as Passover, which celebrates the liberation of ancient Israelites from slavery in Egypt as it is detailed in the Bible. According to Adler, there is very little evidence in non-biblical Judean and foreign sources to suggest that this occasion was celebrated widely among common people prior to the 2nd century BCE. If it was celebrated at all throughout this time period. At the time of Jesus, the holiday of Passover was depicted in the Christian Gospels and other contemporary literature as a long-standing celebration that brought thousands upon thousands of pilgrims to Jerusalem. It is obvious that this had undergone a significant transformation. The Day of Atonement, also known as Yom Kippur, is another one of the most important Jewish holidays. Also known as the Sabbath of Sabbaths, this holy day is characterized by abstinence from food and prayer. According to Adler, the commemoration appears to have been ubiquitous among Judeans by the time when Jesus was alive. This information comes from the Christian Gospels. However, the archaeologist was unable to locate any earlier manuscripts that made reference to the widespread celebration of this event. The same was true for the Feast of Tabernacles, also known as Sukkot. This festival commemorates the time when God provided protection for the Israelites as they traveled through the desert after their exodus from Egypt. Even the classic 7-branched menorah appears to have been created quite some time after the Hebrew Bible was first published. According to Adler's research, not a single example has been uncovered of one shown in Judean or Israelite art prior to the middle of the 1st century BCE. According to the archaeological evidence, synagogues do not begin to exist in substantial numbers until the 1st century CE. According to the findings of Adler's research on dietary practices, which were derived from an examination of the skeletal remains of animals, Judeans avoided eating pork and fish that lacked scales in the centuries that immediately preceded the birth of Jesus. This appears appears to be in accordance with biblical regulations, but the discovery of scattered pig and catfish bones suggests that such limits did not enjoy general support during that time period. According to Adler, these dietary restrictions may have existed prior to the time period covered by the biblical prohibitions and may be associated with secular topics. Pigs are more demanding domesticated animals than sheep or goats because they require more resources, including water, and he points out that pigs require these resources. Construction of the Hasmonean nation. According to Adler, the Judeans were governed by cultural norms and practices inherited from the Iron Age before the middle of the 2nd century BCE. This refers to the centuries immediately following the Israelites landed in Jerusalem. This tradition evidently included the worship of the god Yahweh, and there is evidence of activities that were later adopted as standard, such as the celebration of the Passover dinner on Elephantine Island, which was located in southern Egypt in the year 419 BCE. According to Adler's interpretation, the growth of Jewish rituals that are still popular today coincided with the rise of Judean independence from Hellenistic domination. The Hasmonean dynasty, which originated in Israel and was established approximately 140 BCE, was the first to issue coins that did not depict either animals or people. As the archaeologist contends, it was during this period of time that Judeans became more familiar with Scripture and began to adhere to its lists of rules on a day-to-day basis as they distanced themselves from their former overlords. This occurred at the same time that they began to distance themselves from their former masters. Adler believes that by this point in time, Judeans were already completely enmeshed in a world dominated by Hellenistic culture. Hellenistic culture was a Greek-speaking environment that featured classical study, entertainment, and a well-developed pantheon of gods. His argument is that because of this, Judaism should be understood as having emerged from the furnace of Hellenism rather than from the tents of Abraham or Moses. Adler goes on to say that this emergence was the catalyst for setting the path of much of the world's history for the past 2,000 years, and possibly also for decades, if not millennia to come beyond that. Biblical scholar Gad Barnea, who teaches at the University of Haifa in Israel, hypothesizes that the construction of the Library of Alexandria in the 3rd century BCE was the most likely trigger for the process that led to the codification of the Torah. The Library of Alexandria was an institution that disseminated knowledge and attracted Judean scholars. The biblical historian Konrad Schmid from the University of Zurich in Switzerland is in agreement with the statement that before the Hellenistic period, knowledge of the sacred text was probably restricted to small scribal communities centered on Jerusalem. He hypothesizes that the regulations described in the Hebrew Bible may not have been intended to be laws at all, but rather a document presenting an ideal community. However, he is uncertain as to whether or not the text continued to be unknown to the majority of Judeans even as late as the 2nd century BCE. Barnea deems Adler's work to be essential, and he concurs with Adler's assertion that prior to the Hasmonean era, there appears to be not a shred of consciousness of any degree of familiarity with the Hebrew Bible. Barnea thinks Adler's book important, but Michael Langlois, a biblical scholar at the University of Strasbourg in France who has not yet examined Adler's research, asserts that Judaism existed centuries before the Common Era, albeit in a different form than the Judaism of today, which is practiced in synagogues and is led by rabbis. Langlois has not yet examined Adler's findings. He places the beginning of Judaism prior to the fall of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. He dates the beginning of Judaism to this time period. He continues by saying that the religion gradually developed over the course of many centuries into a variety of forms, one of which was rabbinical Judaism. The consensus of other specialists is the same. According to Jonathan Stock, a biblical expert who teaches at Leiden University in the Netherlands, I would suggest that there are previous types of Judaism that existed before the time of the Hasmoneans. Stockl is a professor at Leiden University. Although Stockl considers Adler's discoveries to be important, he argues that it's possible for Judeans to have been Jews even if they didn't strictly adhere to the rules that are outlined in the Hebrew Bible. the manner in which academics understand the idea of religion will play a role in determining whether or not they acknowledge Adler's daring argument. Samuel has a sneaking suspicion that a good many of scholars will disagree with the notion that widespread adoption of biblical law did not arise until much later in time than was previously believed. He says, "I don't see that this view, even though it seems apparent to me, could claim to be a majority stance in the near future. I don't see that this view could claim to be a majority position in the near future. I'm going to assume that the conventional view has way too much weight." Well, that's all for this video about Is Judaism a younger religion than was once believed? Thank you for watching this video. If you want something to be corrected, please fill it in the comments column, okay? Don't forget to help subscribe, like and comment, so that we are even more excited to make other interesting videos. Bye.